Hi, good afternoon. It's almost getting cool enough. I got a long sleeve shirt on today. It's almost getting cool enough that I can put on the side lighting and won't be in the shadows so much. So soon it's time to come out of the shadows. Otherwise it's just too hot in here. And this falls right in line with my sharing for today. And I call it the beauty of waiting. So I've been waiting for the weather to break, for the weather to cool, and last week sometime I thought it had changed, but maybe it was Indian summer. But anyway, for a week now, it's been cooler and some welcome rain. So, from the heat to the coolness, good things come to all those who wait. When I was a young man, I was probably just as impatient as any other. And as the years have gone by, patience is something that I've grown enough to accomplish. And which came first? Learning to wait, or patience? I think learning to wait probably came first because it was a more stressed out, longer lasting process. It stressed over years, where patience has come probably, if I was honest, in the last 5 years. And at times, I admit that it's a work in progress. So patience and waiting. Patience for me has been that pause between an action and my consequential reaction. It's a pause. That's what patience for me is. Pause and consider. Consider the source of irritation. Consider the sensitivities of the source, the intentions of the source. I've learned long ago not to suffer fools. So anybody in my life has passed at least a rudimentary litmus test of tolerability. Those that actively sought to annoy me have been left by the wayside. Because I just couldn't relate the deliberateness of being irritating. Why would anybody actively search out, seek to be a source of irritation? Perhaps I could have been more like the clam with a grain of sand and coated the irritant with secretions of grace and beauty, which in the clam's case results in a pearl, a physical pearl. Somehow, not being that interested, not that vested in the physical, I inadvertently, most times, created pearls in my mind. The irritant, the grain of sand, might have been an action, a word, and I sat on it. I sat with it. And these secretions that coated the irritant many times turned to be pearls of wisdom. But the beauty of waiting for me is that it's my way to deal with the world, the people around me. I learned at an early age that Nike bit of nonsense, just do it, when I wanted to be active, when I wanted to initiate an action, it just never turned out that well. When I pursued something, actively pursued, when I participated without waiting and watching, waiting for an invitation is a way to put it. Waiting till the conditions are right, that it's a no-brainer that it's time to act. And as in everything, the other side of acting is reacting. So I was always aware of the pendulum. Okay? This action will have what kind of reaction? As a personality type INFJ, I've always had insight to what makes people tick. Could immediately sense or see or figure it out of anybody that came within my expanded aura. And if you can imagine absorbing, knowing to the point, knowing them so well as to experience the world from their perspective. Not always. In fact, most times, not a great thing. But nevertheless, I couldn't avoid this from happening. And from the very beginnings of this, there's always been a certain disconnect between here and here. This distance is much too short. It's too quick. Words come out from thoughts before I even can process them, before I can even consider the efficacy of what I'm about to say. And patience has become, for me, that effort to pause between here and here. Make the distance longer. And this was prompted by a couple of things. The effort to put into this, to develop this pause through patience, was considerable. The only way to change a habit is to do it differently until you can develop a new habit. Replace, hopefully, a better habit with its predecessor. So this is a work in progress for me, but initially I didn't put too much consideration in the impact that my words, directed by insight, directed to whatever I was being insightful, usually a person, whatever I was being insightful towards. Short distance, boom. And short and to the point. Most times, fortunately for me, it went over their head. But when it did hit, it was usually, could be devastating, because it had never been considered. Most times, the problem hadn't even been addressed, hadn't even come from the unconscious to the conscious of the person that I was directing this rapid fire short bursts of words. I could see what was wrong. I had no patience with them refusing or taking too long to see what they're dealing with. And I looked for quick solutions. And you can imagine that the reaction I got when I did this was very seldom positive. And I always felt that it was my duty. If I could see something, if I could help right or wrong, that was my obligation to speak out. And honestly, as a young man, I didn't really concern myself with any impact that this might have. I saw it simply through the lenses of my responsibility to hit them where it hurts. And not intentionally, of course. I never wanted to harm a soul. But I really breached no nonsense. And if you look at that word, nonsense, nonsensical, without sense. Because for me, everything had to make sense. And all my efforts were directed towards finding sense. And I really expected no less of anyone. Well, I mentioned a couple things helped to slow this down. Number one is that I started to be more sensitive to the impact that my words had on people. And began to consider, at this point, I wasn't considering not doing this. Not meeting a person, seeing their problem, and telling them immediately how they could begin to work on this. If not outright solving it for them, if they were so inclined to listen. So there was an arrogance here, I have to say. I can see the problem, why can't you? Pretty arrogant behavior. But most times accurate. What I could see and what I said were seldom off target, usually spot on. But I failed to see my own arrogance that was developing as I perfected the skill. Perfected in the sense of making it more direct, more succinct. And probably ultimately more of a shock, whoever was to receive my cryptic insights. I went for that core. Never wanted to diddle around with the peripheral. Right to the heart of the matter. And these thoughts, as I said, these words were coming from here, the brain. The whole body would sense it, put it up, as I was prone to do, put it up, let it process in the brain, and then short distance from brain to mouth. Well, two things that tempered this. The first was that my expectations of people had become, well, I don't want to say less, but consideration on my part. Consider that my words, the impact of my words. Most people definitely are not prepared to hear the truth, especially when it's barbed, direct as an arrow. Pierce the veil. So consideration that, number one, most people weren't prepared. It was not a helpful activity. It didn't help them in many cases. Or at least if it did, as many would come to me years later and said, you leveled me with the 3 words that you told me once so directly. But after years, it never left. And after years of reflection, you're right. I listened to you. I took your advice. And thank you. Now this seldom happened. Maybe I can count it on one, or the best, 2 hands, where someone sought me out to give me thanks for my cutting remarks. Cut through the crap. So a sensitivity, finally, a sensitivity, an awareness that arrogance was something that I needed to discard with the ego. Arrogance is about judging, and arrogance is based on the underlying belief that you're better than others. And even though if you ask me, I would profess to say, no, I don't harbor any ideas of grandeur that I'm better or less than anyone else. But this simply wasn't true, based on unimpassioned observance of my behavior. Self-criticism. In the process of working on discarding the ego, the things that weren't part of me were easily discarded. I never was greedy. I never cared about power. At least in power in the political sense. Power over others. Not interested in being the boss, not interested in accumulating money for just the sake of accumulation. This greed, so power and greed, easy to shrug off. But when I got around to judgment that had led to arrogance, we're talking a different ball game. But this process helped me to be patient and expand. Even start considering whether or not I should say what I think and see. I should consider the impact. I consider the person's state of being, their awareness. Are they capable of listening to these pinpoint accuracies or not? So patience helped slow down. It made this distance from mind to mouth longer, giving time to pause. And wisdom and insight was responsible for the conclusions of best left unsaid. And the second factor that I alluded to earlier was energy. It takes a lot of energy to do what I was doing, to take in a person, to digest them, to see through them as if they were clear as water, and offer solutions, advice, insights. And the cost was high because this process is not just a one-way process, seeing somebody and seeing through them. It's a process. It's made possible by absorbing them. Part of what they are becomes part of what I am. And it's only through nurturing the violet consuming flame, when I had a place to put the karma that I collected, not only my karma, started with feeding the flame, the violet consuming flame, feeding it with my karma, and then to expand it, to feed it with accumulated karma, that this process that I would accumulate by absorbing people around me, absorbing their energy, incorporating it to me. And it got easier for me to understand that I couldn't accumulate it. That bag of shit that I talked about, 100-pound bag of shit that we all carry and hunch over, carry on our shoulders. When I put it down, this was part of, not only put it down, but placed it in the violet consuming flames, where someone else couldn't stumble along and find it. This violet consuming flame reconstitutes, just as cremation sends us back to the ethers, so does the violet consuming flame send karmas. It cleanses, purifies, as only fire can do. But most importantly, it returns the elements back into the environment, back to be repurposed and used again. So incredible amount of energy this took, and noticing that I just didn't have the energy that I used to have. And it's not easy, this process of accepting it, internalizing it, cleansing it, and sending it on about its business. As far as I could see, there's an unlimited supply out there of karma that can be accumulated without even a conscious effort. It's if part of what we breathe in is karma. The world is full of it, and it takes training, insight, patience, compassion, wisdom to get rid of not only personal karmas that we've accumulated through lifetimes, but also that which we accept from others. To me, this is one of the things that a great master can do. He can take part of your karma with a simple touch or a blessing, take it upon himself, and he knows how to use the flame, the violet consuming flame, to neutralize, to repurpose this karma. But what I notice about most times that people, they feel relief, but they can't hardly wait to rush out and replace their karmic bundles. Go fill that bag up again and again. So this realization that I just didn't have the energy available to use unless I had considered and reflected and waited until such time that accumulating karma was a conscious thing. Reach out with the knowledge of the acceptance of the karma that was coming. Breathe it in, breathe it out, just through waiting.